Alright, here we are. It is a week before Halloween, and I have decided that today's episode we are going to tackle the Rob Zombie films. Why? Because I don't want to have us closing out the main part of this whole discussion of the timeline without talking about the Rob Zombie films. But the Rob Zombie films, as we know, are among the most divisive in the franchise. Now, after the disaster that was Halloween Resurrection, and I mean that in box office standards, it was decided that they would reboot the franchise, which has become sort of a standard nomenclature within Hollywood. We saw the first of reboot films probably around 2003 with the reboot of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Halloween, Rob Zombie's version, follows that in suit, and then we would get Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, to name a couple of more that get reboots. But it is Rob Zombie's films which are, like I said, divisive. It has its fans, it has its detractors. Zombie, of course, is known as a musician, but has become really known as a director over the last couple of decades, especially with House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and the more recently panned Munsters movie. So, let's first break down. Now, as you know, I have discussed my own timeline, which is 11 films in the franchise, and it is the 11 films in the whole entire franchise, minus the Rob Zombie films. And then we do have the original timeline that exists, as you can see here, which is these films minus a few that I don't agree with. And then we have the H20 timeline, which is 4 films. And then the current, if you will, the current look at the timeline. And who knows what's going to happen after this, especially since it looks like they are going to be franchising this in MCU levels. But let's get to the Rob Zombie timeline, which is these two films, and why these two films are the most divisive in the franchise. Now, Rob Zombie's take on Halloween, the first Halloween movie that he did, was unique in that it gave a lot of backstory on Michael Myers. We come and we see, and spoiler alert, what we do find out in Rob Zombie's vision of Halloween is that Michael Myers was in a highly dysfunctional home. He had a good heart. He wanted to do a lot of good. He wanted to protect his siblings, but as we see, certain things go off, and there's a lot of abuse within the home. This is probably the Halloween film with the most language, if you will, there is. It stars Rob Zombie's wife, Sherry Moon, as Michael Myers' mother. And it really starts to set off for us a different way. There is almost a sympathetic way of looking at young Michael in this, which then births into Michael as an adult. This version also stars Tyler Mane, former professional wrestler, as the adult Michael Myers, Scout Taylor Compton as our new Laurie Strode, Brad Dourif as Sheriff Brackett, and Malcolm McDowell as Sam Loomis. As we said, this movie is more of backstory on Michael Myers, and it makes it more sympathetic. Whereas in the original timeline by John Carpenter, we come to understand that he is the Shape, he is evil incarnate, and there is almost no comparison between the two versions of Michael. Now, I do like Zombies' version, the first film. I think it's a great film. I think standalone, if this was the only one that had come out, I think you could shoehorn it in there and say this is the prequel to Halloween, because when he does tell the story that we traditionally know from the 1978 film, there are a lot of almost shot-for-shot remakes. The one thing that I do like is that the ending is a lot different than John Carpenter's Halloween. In John Carpenter's Halloween, we were almost told by the final scene that there was going to be a sequel, because Michael is shot out of the window, falls over, lands on the ground. We see the body on the ground. Sam Loomis goes over and the body is gone. Whereas in Zombies' version, Laurie and Michael go over the top. She lands on top of Michael, wakes up, takes the gun and is ready to shoot him, and then he grabs her wrist. And we're kind of left ambiguous there. Left ambiguous. Let me say that again. Now, while his turn at Halloween 2 was interesting, let me explain. So, it opens up on the same night as the first film, much like the original Halloween 2. But we get a different set of events, much because we got a different set of events in Zombies Halloween. Like, Loomis is injured and shot, and, well, there's just a lot of mysterious stuff that goes on. We do get a flashback back 15 years earlier with young Michael and his mother, and this whole thing about a horse, which plays into future events. But what we get is a night where or I should say, a beginning where the night of the event is not the whole second film, much like it is in the original 81 version. In this version, we get this time being of what happens. Michael escapes, is presumed dead, and then we go 1 year later, and we find out that Laurie is living with Sheriff Brackett, and Dr. Loomis has taken the events of the film and written a book, and there's all sorts of weird things going on that are unique. I will give it that. It's unique. He's taking it in a whole new direction. The one thing that we do get here is Zombies' take on Loomis's fall from grace in the public, I guess we would say. In the original films with Donald Pleasence, we know that Dr. Loomis is a capable psychiatrist, and that what the public views as paranoia about Michael Myers is definitely founded in truth. Whereas the Malcolm McDowell version takes it to a whole new extreme, where he's more obsessed with his celebrity and building culture, and the people turn against him. The ending of this film is nothing more than a fever dream, if you will, for me, where we come to this moment where there is a cabin. Laurie discovers the truth of her origins. Loomis goes in trying to resuscitate her. Michael stabs him and ends up shot by Brackett and impaled on a rake. And the film basically ends with Laurie ready to take on The Cult of Thorn. At least that's where I think they would have gone with this version. But she is now in Smith's Grove Sanatorium, wearing a mask and a grin, and basically now seemingly endowed with the evil that is Michael Myers. Now, my thoughts on the two films are this. I think they are a unique vision. I think they are and deserve to be counted in the Halloween franchise as an alternate timeline. As we know right now, the big discussion within the current franchise is that they are looking at possibly building a multiverse of what-if scenarios, and this would be a perfect example of that. If they want to sell that idea, then use the Rob Zombie films, because, like I said, they have their own merits. I don't hate them. I just don't count them as part of the main franchise. I think they are unique. I think Zombie is a unique director in and of himself. I am not a fan of his early work. I think Devil's Rejects is a much better film than House of a Thousand Corpses. But House of a Thousand Corpses is like his first film, so he was still learning things at that time. And, whenever I see that film, I feel like I have to take a shower. It just is dirty. Whereas here we get to start to see Zombie take on as a director. And granted, like I said, he made last year's failure of the Munsters movie, which on paper, in trailer form, sounded good. I have not watched it, but all I have heard is bad stuff about it. And usually I like to watch a movie and decide for myself, but I grew up as a Munsters fan, much like Rob Zombie, and I cannot see that being twisted the way that I'm hearing it was twisted. But I digress. Let's get back to, does the Rob Zombie Halloween films have merit? Yes, they do. I like how he tries to give us a backstory. I like to kind of see how this boy became how he did. And the problem is that if you line it up with the original film, Rob Zombie's version is Michael comes from a white trash family, whereas John Carpenter's version, Michael comes from a white middle class family. So there's two different versions there. There's two different pieces of the puzzle. And so, yes, like I said, you would have to shoehorn it as a prequel, only the first film. But I will say this. I will say that what we do get is a unique multiverse, possibly the first multiverse story of the franchise. So, do I think you should see it? Yes. I think you should see both films. But understand that these are not the John Carpenter vision. The other 11 films have an essence of John Carpenter, whether he directed them or did them or produced them or had something to do with them. There is an essence of John Carpenter in those films. When you watch them, that Michael feels like he's the same Michael. It doesn't matter if you want to believe the other timelines or not. There is always an essence there of John Carpenter. Like, Michael just feels speechless, faceless, and evil incarnate. Rob Zombie's films is trying to make us feel for Michael, feel sorry for Michael, and while that seems to be the big thing of the current decade, taking stories like the Wicked Witch of the West, say, in Wicked, where we think of her from The Wizard of Oz as incarnate evil. Wicked gives us a backstory where we're like, maybe she wasn't as evil as we thought. And the same can be said here. That's what Zombie is trying to do. But Do I think you need to see it? Yes. Go ahead and see it. It is its own timeline, and that's why I'm leaving with this card on here to show you Rob Zombie's timeline and the Reverend Geek's timeline. Until next week, people, geek out.